pray to anyone. Go shed a few more layers. You will feel lighter when you're done. Find a friend in the chaos inside you who'll understand when there's nowhere to turn. Find the meaning in all of the madness. There is a thing or two you might learn. I can register the words you're saying, but I might not agree.
I saw that you covered a song by Nick Drake. It's the song "Which Will," which is on the album Pink Moon. How was it for you to do that at all?
Meditative, I would say. Like, learning that guitar part was such a brain teaser. Just getting all of the notes in the right place was such a good exercise for me, and then singing it is just like gliding over this pattern of complexity. So yeah, it was a joy, and I guess, you know, my first instinct was to say like intimidating to try to cover any of his work, but I don't like to think of it in those terms, like, because it's not about trying to replicate or like. To me, covering a song is just a way of paying tribute and honoring your teachers. It's like when you go to art school and paint a replica of a painting of a master. It's just like you're learning through absorbing their consciousness. You know, you're putting yourself in the place of trying to follow in their footsteps and just figure out like what choices they made, the state of mind they were in when they created that work, so that you can learn through direct transmission.
Okay. Could you say when you sang the song, like, "I am Nick"?
Oh, sure you could, because I'm a believer that we are all one consciousness, dancing in many forms, and to me, like, a recorded piece of music is such a portal, like a direct pathway to like get close to being inside someone's head. It's like, this is my experience, this is how I feel right now, this is my interpretation of reality. So when you can follow closely in those pathways, I like to believe you're getting close to feeling the way that they might have felt.
Yeah, because the reason I asked is when I think of Nick Drake, he really, when you listen to him, he really gets you to a place where it's quiet, and for me, the madness of the day stands still, and he takes me to somewhere where there were no worries. I was a child. I see myself in the garden of my parents, and something happens. It's quite magical, and I'm not the only person who says that. So, but I also hear his technique is very complex, like you say. So that's why I ask you. His troubled life and his difficulty to get success with his work, and he was really shy. And do you think he's a singer that is there for the lost souls?
Well, what you were saying about...
Maybe I say two things now, sorry.
No, I think they're tied together. I can see a connection, because the simplicity of the place that it transports you, I feel, is connected to the complexity of the rhythms in a way that feels very nature-based. Like, to me, the experience of listening to his music is almost like listening to like the rushing of a river or like looking at a beautiful flower. And there are all these very complex patterns in nature that seem so simple, but when you actually like start to analyze them and break them down, it's like, whoa, like how does that even happen? These spirals and ripples and this like patterns that I think are too complex for our brains to even comprehend in nature. But that sort of translates, it's like looking at a mandala, you know, something so complex, but that just is so perfect and feels simple to absorb.
Oh, that's interesting that you say that. So you think his songs were really connected to that?
I feel
to understanding?
That. Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're coming they just bloom organically like this flower, you know, but when you start to take it apart, it's so complex, but it can be absorbed as just this very simple gesture.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the lost souls question, I feel like in a way right now humanity is so teeming with lost souls. Like we've all gotten quite lost recently in terms of straying from our connection to nature. And I think music like Nick's is a signpost leading us back to that state of peace and balance and harmony with the patterns of nature. So I do feel like it's medicine for the times in that way. Like it's just like a call to remember how to be.
Mm-hmm. Do you also recognize a kind of loneliness in his songs? Because I think myself he was very withdrawn, and he could only come up with these songs because of really being very close to himself. And do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think as an artist, a certain amount of solitude is just absolutely necessary, and I think there's so much beauty in dwelling with him in that space of aloneness, which contains everything, obviously. Like, it's in his aloneness that music can bloom. So that's, it's an encouraging sign to me that, like, that's the answer, like, is to go inward, because that's, you know, all of this beauty and richness that we can be looking for in the external world exists within us, and we kind of just need to, like, listen and create space for it to exist. So, of course, like, loneliness is real, and I know he probably suffered quite a bit as a person, but I'm so glad that he did take that time to be with himself.
Yeah,
we all get to benefit from it.
Yeah, but not much time. He there was a lot of contradictory things going on. It was the 60s, and it was when success stayed out, he went back to his parents' house and went to live there. I was there, like many other fans, to do this pilgrimage to his grave, and it's a really small village. And if you stay there, you can imagine you feel like in a bubble, or an English friend said you could not leave the Midlands, you could not get away. It must have been hard, because there was a harsh world then also, of course, but it was a totally different time, no internet. And do you feel connected to those days of the 60s?
I do.
Like the hippie days?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, when I was a little kid, I was so obsessed with everything about that generation, and just really felt like I was born in the wrong time.
Yeah.
But I see now that I feel like my generation is perhaps picking up some of the lost threads from the 60s that I think got squashed. You know, the, like, hippie movement happened, and then the 70s and 80s happened, so people were like, well, we tried that, you know, like the whole free love, peace and joy thing, like, we tried that and look what happened, you know. And I think we kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater a bit, because there was so much validity in a lot of what was happening in the 60s, but then it got squashed and people gave up on it, and now I think is a cool time to be remembering what people learned and were teaching about at that time, and apply the wisdom of what happened afterwards,
Right.
and like not make the same mistakes and not let the same things happen.
What mistakes?
Well, like, for instance, like AIDS, like the AIDS epidemic, or like
Yeah, but that was the 80s, right?
right, but it seems connected to the wave of like free love and like just have sex with everyone. But so now it's like, well, yeah, like have sex with everyone, but like use protection, you know, like it's a kind of silly metaphor, but just for one encapsulated example, just like just because like STDs are a thing doesn't mean like we shouldn't have sex, you know what I mean? It's like, and just because certain movements of resistance were not effective, like, you know, I think a lot of people lost hope on the dream because they were like, well, we tried, you know, we protested Vietnam and like we're at war again, you know, like it didn't work, or like you know, the civil rights movement happened and look at what's happening in our country now, you know. I think it's just like there are all of these interesting parallels between what's happening now and what was happening in the 60s, and I think we can learn a lot if we let ourselves like look back and like see what happened like on the whole trajectory of the wave. Like we can take from it valuable information and apply it in ways that will be more effective this time around. Does that make sense?
Yes. Because I also think that in those days the younger people, they had more perspective maybe than they do now. And I'm wondering what that is.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm also studying what is England, but you are not from England. You are, when you think of the hippie times, you think of what happened in the United States, of course. Do you think it's a different stream than in Europe those days?
They were definitely so connected, mostly by music. I feel like with the Beatles and you know the British invasion was like such a huge part of what was going on in America. So yeah.
So just a moment ago we were talking about Amy Winehouse, and she had an incredible life as an artist and worked very, very hard, but also she needed those drugs. And in the end, she couldn't cope with life anymore, which is a pity because she died very young. But when we think of Mr. Nick Drake, he died when he was 26 and he left life, he did it by himself. And this is such a contradictory. What do you think happened, or how is it possible that somebody making such beautiful work and at the same time is so depressed from life?
I don't feel like it's a contradiction at all because you see it all the time. I mean, it's just a sensitivity, you know. I think the people who are sensitive and attuned enough to the beautiful aspects of life are almost inherently going to be more sensitive than most to the sorrows and weight and tragedies of life. And to me as an artist, it feels very, very challenging to separate the two or to keep one without the other. And it's something that I've struggled with as an artist for sure, just like from such a young age. Just it's like most people's bandwidth for sensitivity is like here and mine is here, you know, like out in all directions. Like I feel, when I feel anything, I feel it to the extreme. And that's like the artistic temperament, and it's what allows you to feel things that everyone feels, but like to this extreme that kind of galvanizes you into the creative act. To like, it's like I feel this so intensely, I have to do something with it, you know, and that can be channeled into creativity or it can be channeled into self-harm. And I think it's what drives artists to addictions and avoidance, because it's a lot. It's like it's so much to hold and feel all the time. So
And how does it have to do with the pressure from the outside world, the expectations?
I think it can, especially once you're doing it in public and have fans, or like are making a living from it. Or it can be an internalized external pressure of like wanting to make people proud, wanting to be worthy of love, wanting to prove yourself if you had parents that didn't give you the love that you needed. But yeah, I think that's kind of a sister issue.
Yeah.
There's the sensitivity, and then there's the reasons that we have to feel inadequate or something.
It's actually amazing that now his work, the work of Nick Drake, is so relived by young people also, and many people find him, and then something happens, and it is not letting them go. But that's a good thing that survives. Isn't it what that's all about?
Yeah, I mean, there's something about the creative urge that, if you look at like the Indian system of the chakras, like it's like all sacral second chakra stuff, like the desire to like procreate and like make new human life is like the sex drive, which is the same place that the creative drive sits. And so I think it's all coming from this desire to like continue your line, your lifeline beyond your own one mortal life. So as an artist, I do think your songs or your creations are your children that are sent out into future generations to keep your consciousness going.
That's so lovely. When you send a message, it says "sent from the future." It's totally cool. Then a little bit the lyrics. You know William Blake. Do you feel connected to William Blake?
I do.
With your songs, I mean.
Yeah, I could see that. Because he's hanging out with like the angelic realms and sort of channeling information gained in visionary states and making art that tries to convey that. And so that's definitely something I can relate to.
Yeah, I also hear that Nick Drake read a lot of his work or was inspired by it, and I try to see that in the lyrics.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I've never heard that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. Yeah, I cannot also point a finger on it, but it's really also the love for nature. And
it's like a deep mysticism.
Yeah. I see you as like a troubadour, if I can say, and maybe Nick Drake was that too, but he was very shy. How is that for you? Are you not afraid on stage when you sing because of the work, or do you also experience shyness?
Yeah, it's been a lifelong struggle for me, and something that still moves in waves, and I definitely get psyched out a lot. Like I have this kind of psychosomatic throat issue that comes and goes, where like sometimes my throat will just completely close up in the middle of a set, and I know that it's happening in my mind, but that it's hard to, even when you know something's a mental problem, it can be very hard. Those can be the hardest problems to overcome, because you just start going down these deeper and deeper rabbit holes.
So, like, you think there's something wrong. You think there's something wrong.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it's an anxiety, you know, it's like, it's obviously something that I'm creating in my mind because I'm just afraid of what people will think of me, or like, am I doing a good enough job? Any number of things that can set it off subconsciously too. Like that's the unsettling thing about it, is like there's no clear trigger for it. It's just like performance is such an intense thing to do. Like there's so much energy out in a room and just in your own body to manage, and thoughts are flying at you from other people. You know, people are thinking all these thoughts about you, whether it's like desiring you or judging you, hating you, envying you, so much charged emotion, or just feeling, you know, there's so much emotion happening in a room. And I think, like I said before about being an extremely sensitive being as an artist, I think that that can make performance extremely overwhelming. Like when you're so empathically connected to other beings and just feeling everything in your own body, to put yourself on stage like that is pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always kind of, to me, been a little bit inspiring that Nick Drake was just like, he just kind of didn't perform. I'm like, that sounds so nice. And to be able to just record music and have people listening to it decades later.
But he did perform because that's the way Joe Boyd discovered him.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
in a festival, and but he was also like only looking at his shoes.
Okay.
But still, his voice reached the right person in the one of the people from Fairport Convention.
Okay.
Do you know the group?
Yeah, I do. That's interesting. Yeah, I honestly don't know much about his personal life, but someone had told me once that he just kind of didn't fuck with performing because of all the open tunings and just shyness.
Yeah, that was quite dominant, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he did perform. There are some, proofs from, you know, posters and flyers from it.
Okay.
But not
Not much.
not much, no.
Yeah.
So one last question about you picked up the album Pink Moon. Can you remember how you got to that? Did you find it in a record store or?
It's actually kind of embarrassing, but interesting. I heard the song Pink Moon on a car commercial in America when I was probably like 12 or 13, and I was just like watching TV with my parents, and then this commercial came on and I heard that song and it was just like what is this? Like, what is this sound? And I don't even remember how I found out, because I think it was like sort of pre-internet days. I mean, there was like the internet, but it wasn't what it was today. You couldn't just like Google like, what is this song that I just heard on this car commercial, you know? So I forget how I found my way to him, but I'm so grateful for that. And it's actually, come to think of it, that's like a good humbling reframe of like licensing songs in commercials, because usually I have so much resistance to that and I'm like, ugh, like I don't want to sell out like that, but actually I owe so much to that Volkswagen commercial, whatever that was. And then I remember going to, once I've had the name, then I went to a record shop and it was just like, give me everything by this guy. And the record store clerk was like so impressed. Like this 12-year-old was coming in like, yo, where's your Nick Drake? Give me everything you got.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. That commercial is really one that got people, gave him more popularity for a larger group of people. So it's a great story, this. So then what happened when you played it? Can you remember that?
The whole record? Or...
Yeah. Like in your room, you were 12, you said?
Something like that, yeah.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. That can probably be fact-checked now thanks to the internet. I'm not sure, maybe 12 to 14, somewhere in there.
Yeah, but young.
Young, and I think I had just bought a guitar. So it was definitely, like, he and Elliott Smith both found their way into my life in the same year. So the two of them together just totally, like, opened my mind to what is possible as a guitarist and songwriter. Just, really like set a template in my mind of just thinking way outside the box, finding your own shapes and finding your own like harmonic qualities. Like I just had no interest in just like learning like C major, A major, G major. Like I was just like, I'm just gonna fuck up the tunings and find something that sounds interesting to me and then like intuitively explore shapes and patterns.
Mhm.
And so that's, yeah, like he really was the invitation to just approaching that instrument in an unconventional way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Oh, thank you, Johanna Warren.
All in a day's work.
Okay, and speak to you later.
I don't need to know what chords you're playing to know what's out of key.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling the connection. Okay. Ready?
Mhm.
Memory, hither come, and tune your merry notes. And while upon the wind your music floats, I'll pour upon the stream where sighing lovers dream, and fish for fancies as they pass within the watery glass. I'll drink of the clear stream and hear the linnet's song, and there I'll lie and dream the day along. And when night comes, I'll go to places fit for woe, walking along the darkened valley with silent melancholy.